Biden teams up with Harris on campaign trail for first time since dropping re-election bid against Trump 6 weeks after he ended his re-election campaign amid rising calls from his own party to drop out of the race. President Biden returns to the campaign trail for the first time on Monday. It will be the first of a robust schedule of campaign appearances by the president on behalf of Vice President Kamala Harris over the next 2 months, a White House official tells Fox News. President Biden will be leaning in heavily over the next several months to finish the job, White House Communications Director Ben LaBolt said. Biden will team up with Harris, whom he endorsed and who replaced him atop the Democrats' 2024 ticket, at a Labor Day event in Pittsburgh, a Union stronghold and the biggest city in the western half of the key battleground state of Pennsylvania. The Harris campaign says that the vice president is expected to say that U.S. Steel, the Pittsburgh-based corporation which is the nation's second biggest steel producer, should remain domestically owned and operated and stress her commitment to always have the backs of American steelworkers. The stop is part of a full-court press by the Harris campaign on Labor Day in some of the 7 key swing states that will likely determine the winner of the vice president's election showdown with former President Donald Trump, the Republican nominee. LaBolt said that going forward, Biden will be campaigning to elect Vice President Harris and Governor Walz and spending time with core constituencies with whom he has a long relationship, continuing to deploy investments in manufacturing, infrastructure, and emerging industries like clean energy, and strengthening our alliances on the world stage. Biden's disastrous performance against Trump in their late June debate turned up the volume on existing concerns from Americans that the 81-year-old president would have the physical and mental stamina to handle another 4 years in the White House. It also sparked a rising chorus of calls from top Democratic Party allies and elected officials for Biden to drop out of the race, which he did on July 21st. Biden was showered with chants of, "Thank you, Joe," as he teamed up with Harris on Aug 15 in Largo, Maryland for their first joint appearance since his departure from the 2024 race. While it was billed as an official White House event to announce that the federal government had negotiated lower prescription drug prices with pharmaceutical companies that will likely save Americans billions of dollars, the gathering had the feel of a political rally. Biden claims Netanyahu not doing enough to secure deal with terrorists. Democratic nominee Vice President Kamala Harris is urging her supporters to not pay too much attention to the polls because we are running as the underdog. Harris, at a rally in Savannah, Georgia, late last week, pointed to her showdown with Trump and said, "We have some hard work ahead of us." Most of the latest national surveys show Harris with a slight single-digit edge over Trump. But the presidential election is not a national popular vote contest. It is a battle for the individual states and their electoral votes. The latest surveys in the 7 battleground states that decided the 2020 election between Trump and President Biden and will likely determine the outcome of the 2024 showdown indicate a margin of error race. Among those polls are a batch from Fox News that made headlines last week. It is a big change from earlier this summer when Biden was still running. Biden's disastrous performance against Trump in their late June debate turned up the volume of existing doubts from Americans that the 81-year-old president would have the physical and mental stamina to handle another 4 years in the White House. It also sparked a rising chorus of calls from top Democratic Party allies and elected officials for Biden to drop out of the race. National and battleground state polls conducted in July indicated Trump had opened up a small but significant lead over Biden. J.D. Vance rips Kamala Harris for flip-flopping during CNN interview. Important for us not to buy this. Republican vice presidential candidate J.D. Vance warned Americans not to buy Democratic presidential nominee Kamala Harris's policy positions during her first sit-down interview since launching her 2024 bid, as critics accuse her of flip-flopping on key issues. Vance slammed Harris's performance during the CNN interview on Fox and Friends, accusing her of only pretending to be more moderate to garner more votes ahead of the November election. VP Harris mocked for being too scared to do interview without Walz. She simply cannot be left unattended. "I think it's important for us not to buy this," Vance said on Friday. If you look at the way that Kamala Harris has governed, she's actually governed as a far-left person. She's just trying to pretend that she's not far-left now because, of course, she wants to win the American people's votes over the next couple of months. But if she does, she's going to do the same thing that she's been doing for the last few years. Vance called her out for flip-flopping on various issues, warning that Americans would face a higher cost of living, an open border, and a more dangerous world under a Harris administration. It's really absurd for Kamala Harris to sit there and say, well, I don't actually believe in any of the things that I told you I believed 3 years ago. She has governed as a person who believes those things, and unfortunately, the American people are far off because of it, he continued. CNN anchor warns Harris in for difficult debate with Trump. He's very persistent. CNN host Abby Phillip warned Vice President Kamala Harris that she could not afford to ignore former President Trump on stage, despite her refusal to respond to criticisms from him during a CNN interview on Thursday. Let's not be mistaken. Donald Trump is tall and very loud, and he's very persistent, Phillips said in a discussion Thursday night about Harris's ability to ignore Trump's criticisms while on stage with him for a debate. Harris refused to respond to comments that Trump made at the National Association of Black Journalists about the vice president's presentation of her racial identity during an interview with CNN's Dana Bash. 3 years after U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan, Israel looks to lessons learned from War on Terror. The U.S. on Friday marked its 3rd anniversary of the complete withdrawal from Afghanistan and the closure of the 20 years-long war. But questions remain over the lessons learned from the U.S. War on Terror and what can be applied to Israel's fight against Islamic extremism. The collapse of Kabul to the Taliban, followed by the killing of 13 U.S. service members and 170 Afghans by ISIS-K terrorists on Aug. 26, 2021, left a blackened mark on what was already perceived as a chaotic conclusion to the U.S.'s longest-ever war. However, it also left Americans questioning the effectiveness of the USS strategy in countering al-Qaeda and Islamic extremism in general. Jim Jordan's subpoenas company, led by daughter of NYV Trump Judge House Judiciary Committee Chairman Jim Jordan, R. Ohio, is issuing a subpoena for information on the political work conducted by the daughter of New York State Supreme Court Judge Juan Merchan. Jordan sent a letter to Michael Nellis, the founder and CEO of Authentic Campaigns, a company that's done political work for top Democratic clients like President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, accusing him of failing to comply with House investigators' demands for any and all documents related to the prosecution of former President Trump. The committee wrote to Lauren Merchan, the company's president and Judge Merchan's daughter, earlier this month requesting documents in its probe into Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg's case against Trump. Jordan pointed out in his Wednesday letter that Nellis himself rejected that request, as well as a subsequent one later in the month. Bragg defers to Merchan, won't block Trump's request to push hush money sentencing until after election. Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg's office said they would not oppose former President Donald Trump's request to push his sentencing date for his hush money conviction until after the November election, leaving the decision up to New York Supreme Court Judge Juan Merchan. The people defer to the court on the appropriate post-trial schedule that allows for adequate time to adjudicate defendant's motion while also pronouncing sentence without reasonable delay. The letter addressed to Merchan and dated Aug 16 states, the letter, signed by Bragg's assistant district attorneys, including Matthew Colangelo, a former Biden Justice Department official, was made public on Monday. In a letter of their own made public on Thursday, Trump lawyers Todd Blanche and Emil Bove suggested that sentencing Trump as scheduled on September 18, about 7 weeks before Election Day, would amount to election interference. They requested to delay the September 18 sentencing in New York v. Trump until after the election. Election interference. Trump lawyers call for delayed sentencing in Bragg case. Lawyers for former President Trump are requesting his sentencing hearing in New York. V's Trump be delayed until after the November presidential election, citing naked election interference objectives. Trump was found guilty in an unprecedented criminal trial on all counts of falsifying business records in the first degree, following a 6-week trial stemming from Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg's investigation. Trump has moved to overturn his criminal conviction in the Manhattan case after the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that a former president has substantial immunity for official acts committed while in office. Why Kamala Harris and Dana Bash get a mixed grade in VP's first media sit-down? Kamala Harris handled herself reasonably well in her first interview as the Democratic nominee, though she deflected a number of questions and said some untrue things. It makes you wonder why her advisors refused to allow her to talk to journalists, building up the pressure before last night's CNN sit-down. Anchor Dana Bash did a fine job of pressing the vice president and following up. She does it in a low-key style, though she frittered away many moments with softer "how does it feel" questions. Zuckerberg, expressing regrets, admits bowing to Biden administration pressure to remove content. Mark Zuckerberg just had to eat several large helpings of crow. And some minor political flap wasn't on the menu. As the Wall Street Journal first reported, the CEO of Facebook and Meta expressed regret on such weighty matters as government-induced censorship and free speech. Trump threatens to quit Kamala debate after RFK backs him, denounces media. It's good for Zuck to accept some degree of responsibility, but it's kinda too late. By about 3 years. The admissions came in a letter to Jim Jordan, the House Judiciary Chairman, and is a major win for the Republicans. The one-time Harvard whiz kid usually digs in defensively with vague promises of future reform. After the pandemic hit, Zuckerberg wrote, "Senior Biden administration and White House officials had repeatedly pressured our teams for months to censor certain COVID-19 content, including humor and satire, and expressed a lot of frustration with our teams when we didn't agree." Mark Zuckerberg, Joe Biden, a side-by-side of Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg and U.S. President Joe Biden. Getty Images. That is an important distinction. The Biden pressure tactics didn't always work. Facebook could and sometimes did say no.